I never used to believe in urban legends. To me, they were just made-up stories designed to scare kids or get likes on the internet. But everything changed that night when I encountered something I still can't explain. I was browsing through a shady forum, one of those hidden gems you only find deep in the dark corners of the web, looking for material for my YouTube channel. My niche is investigating internet mysteries, from creepypastas to supposedly cursed videos. That's when I saw a mention of a video titled 3 Real Clown Horror Stories. The post was old, more than a decade old, and claimed the video had been removed from YouTube for violating community guidelines. What caught my attention were the comments. Many people claimed to have watched the video and shared terrifying experiences afterward. Some said they heard laughter at night. Others swore they saw a clown watching them from afar. One user even wrote, "If you find this video, don't watch it. It watches you back." Of course, I didn't believe it. I thought it was just another urban legend like Slender Man or the Boogeyman. But curiosity got the better of me. After hours of digging through forums and shady websites, I found an archived link. The video was still there, hidden away in a forgotten corner of the internet. When I clicked to watch, the quality was awful. The image was shaky, the audio distorted, and there were abrupt cuts that seemed to hide something. A hoarse, mechanical voice began to narrate. "These are 3 horror stories involving real clowns. Watch at your own risk." The first story began with an old recording from an amusement park in the 80s. The colors were faded, and the image wobbled like it had been filmed with a home video camera. The distorted voice of the narrator echoed. In the 80s, in a small amusement park in the middle of nowhere, a mysterious clown started appearing. He wasn't part of the park's official cast. No one knew where he came from, but the kids loved him. The camera showed grainy footage of children laughing and running on a carousel. In the background, almost imperceptible, there was a tall, awkward figure in a colorful clown costume. He was standing, watching. The clown performed magic tricks, handed out candy and small gifts. But the children who interacted with him disappeared, hours later. Always hours later. The screen cut to an interview with an elderly woman, her face blurred to protect her identity. She spoke with a shaky voice. "I saw him. He didn't have a shadow. I looked at the ground and there was no shadow. And when I tried to tell the park staff, he just disappeared." The narrator continued. No official photos or videos of the park ever captured the clown. He was never seen entering or leaving, and the children who disappeared were never found. The screen darkened for a moment, then a blurry photo of a clown smiling appeared. The smile was too wide, almost grotesque, and the eyes seemed hollow. The caption read, "Can you see him?" I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to rationalize it. It was just a story, right? A scary tale invented to entertain. But something about that image unsettled me deeply. Before I could process it, the second story began. The second story started with an old homemade video, the kind that looked like it was filmed on VHS. The quality was poor, with faded colors and a subtle hum in the audio. The scene showed a group of friends at a party, laughing and goofing off in a dimly lit room. The narrator's voice returned, lower and darker. In 1995, a group of friends decided to record a party at a house in the middle of the woods. They didn't know something was watching them. The camera shook as someone filmed the room. Beer bottles were scattered around, loud music played, and laughter filled the air. In the background, through a dark window, a figure appeared. It was a clown, with painted face and an exaggerated smile. He was standing there watching the party. No one at the party noticed the clown in the window, but he was there, in every recording. The screen cut to an interview with one of the survivors, his face pixelated. He spoke with a hoarse, tired voice. "We only noticed when we watched the tapes the next day. He was in every single one. Always by the window, always smiling. We thought it was a joke, you know. But no one remembered hiring a clown." The narrator continued. Days later, everyone in the ER group was found dead. The police never figured out what happened. The only clue was a large, disproportionate footprint, as if someone had been wearing clown shoes, found in the mud in the yard. The screen showed a photo of the house's window with a dark stain that seemed to form the outline of a smiling face. The caption read, "Is he still there?" I felt a cold shiver run down my neck. I tried to convince myself it was all staged, but something about this story bothered me deeply. The clown from both stories seemed to be the same smile, the same posture. Before I could reflect, the third story began. The third story began with a static recording of a dark road, lit only by the headlights of a truck. The narrator's voice was deeper now, almost whispering. In 2003, a truck driver named Carl was driving down a deserted road on a rainy night. That's when he saw the clown. The screen showed a dramatic reenactment, a man at the wheel staring at the wet road. Suddenly, he slowed down. On the side of the road in the rain stood a clown. He wore a colorful outfit, now soaked, and carried a small suitcase. Carl stopped to help. The clown got into the truck but didn't say a word. He just smiled. The scene shifted to an interview with a police officer, his face blurred. He spoke with a tense voice. When we found the truck, Carl was dead. He had a smile drawn on his face as if someone had used a pen to stretch his mouth. And in the back seat, there was a clown's hat, wet. The narrator continued. The police never found any footprints around the truck. The clown simply vanished. And the hat didn't belong to anyone known. The screen showed a photo of the hat, abandoned on the truck's back seat. The caption read, "Is he still out there?" My heart started to race. The three stories had something in common. The clown was never caught, and the witnesses either died or disappeared, and that smile, that grotesque smile that seemed to repeat in every narrative. When the video ended, the screen went black for a moment. Then a message appeared. "Did you see him? He saw you." I closed my laptop, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave me. I couldn't sleep that night. The stories from the video echoed in my mind, especially that grotesque smile of the clown. The next day I decided to investigate. After all, that's what I did on my channel, unravel mysteries. But this time, something felt different. I started researching the cases mentioned in the video. To my surprise, I found out that all of them were based on real events. The disappearance of children at the amusement park in the 80s had been reported in local newspapers. The party at the house in the woods really ended in tragedy, with everyone at the party dying under mysterious circumstances. And the truck driver Carl? His case was filed as unsolved. I found a shady forum where people were discussing the video. Some users claimed to have watched it and reported frightening experiences afterward. One of them wrote, "I saw him in my room right after the video ended. He was in the corner just smiling." Another said, "Be careful. He's watching you." That's when I noticed something strange happening in my own house. Objects started shifting places without explanation. Sometimes I'd hear soft laughter, like someone was laughing at me. And once, I saw a shadow in the hallway that vanished when I turned to look. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks after watching something so disturbing. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And then, the video disappeared. The next morning, I decided to rewatch the video. I needed to analyze every detail, every frame, to understand what was going on. But when I opened the archived link, it was corrupted. The screen only showed static and distorted sounds like muffled laughter. I tried to access the site where I had found the video, but it was gone too. It was as if the internet had swallowed any trace of that recording. That's when I realized I was the only one who could still tell these stories. I decided to re-record the video for my channel. After all, I had taken notes and could reproduce the stories accurately. I set up my camera, adjusted the lighting, and began recording. But in the middle of the narration, something strange happened. On the camera screen, behind me, there was a figure. It was tall, awkward, in a colorful outfit. My heart stopped. It was him, the clown. I spun around quickly, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the camera, the figure was gone too. I tried to convince myself it was just a reflection, an optical illusion. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. From that moment on, things got worse. The laughter grew more frequent, and the shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I was being watched, and worst of all, the clown knew. I couldn't take it anymore. The laughter, the shadows, the constant feeling of being watched. It was unbearable. I decided to record one final video for my channel, explaining everything that had happened. Maybe if I exposed the truth, someone could help me. I set up the camera in my room and began talking. My voice trembled, but I had to tell it. I spoke about the video, the stories, the investigations, and what had been happening to me. As I spoke, I felt something behind me, a presence. I looked at the camera screen. He was there, the clown, standing in the corner of my room, with that grotesque smile. My heart raced. I spun around quickly, but as before, no one was there. I looked back at the camera. He was still on the screen, but now closer. His eyes seemed to glow and his smile stretched from ear to ear. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't move. The camera fell to the floor and the screen shook. I heard heavy footsteps approaching. The last thing I saw was the clown's face leaning over me, while his laughter echoed in the room. When I woke up, I was alone. The camera was still recording. I watched the video, expecting to see the clown, but he wasn't there. To anyone who watched it, it seemed like I was alone, imagining things. The video was posted on my channel. Comments started rolling in. "Are you okay? That was staged, right? Where's the clown?" No one saw him. No one but me. And then, a message appeared. On my screen, the clown never existed, or did he? It was a moonless night, and the biting wind whistled through the dry branches of trees that had seemed dead for decades. I stood in front of the rusted gate of an abandoned park, where the peeling paint still displayed the face of a smiling clown. The smile was wide, almost comical, but over time it had taken on something strange, almost threatening, as if it were watching me. A chill ran down my spine, and I wondered how a place designed for happiness and fun had become so unsettling. I've always been fascinated by how seemingly innocent symbols can acquire such dark meanings. Think about clowns, for example. They were meant to entertain, to make people laugh, especially children. And yet, over time, they have transformed into figures of nightmare. Maybe it's because of the movies, or maybe there has always been something disturbing about their masks of joy, that high-pitched laugh and the red nose. Have you ever noticed how they never show their real emotions? Everything is hidden by makeup, a true curtain that conceals the person behind the show. As I stared at that decaying park, I wondered, what makes such colorful, vibrant figures turn into our worst nightmares? Was it the movies that taught us to fear them? Or was it because deep down we always knew there was something wrong with them? After all, every smile that's too wide hides secrets. At that moment, something moved in the distance among the ruins of the park. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but I stood frozen, unable to look away. I knew I had to understand why the fear of clowns transcended fiction. It wasn't just an unfounded dread. It was something real. Something far darker was hidden behind their laughs. I've always been intrigued by how certain fears seem to be embedded in our subconscious. Have you ever wondered why so many people are afraid of clowns? I mean, it's odd, right? They're just performers in costumes trying to make us laugh with tricks and jokes. But for many people, and I count myself among them, they represent something deeply unsettling. Experts call it coulrophobia, the irrational fear of clowns. But is it really that irrational? Think about it. A clown's face is a mask, a disguise. You don't know who's behind that exaggerated smile, those painted eyes, and that high-pitched laugh. It's the unknown that scares us. And there's something else too. Psychologists talk about something called the uncanny valley. It's when something is almost human but not quite. And it's that near humanness that gives us the chills. I remember watching a documentary where a psychologist explained how the exaggerated expressions of clowns, with their enlarged eyes and painted mouths, create a kind of disconnect. Our brain tries to interpret it as friendly, but at the same time it feels that something is off. It's like there's an internal warning telling us that this colorful figure isn't as harmless as it seems. The fear of clowns isn't a new thing. It existed long before films like It or The Joker from Batman made their way to the big screen. But it's undeniable that these portrayals in pop culture helped cement the terror in our minds. Who could forget Pennywise, with his glowing eyes and wicked grin? He was more than just a villain, he was a reflection of our deepest fears, and it doesn't stop there. In 1978, when Batman's Joker was explored as a psychologically unstable character, it paved the way for the idea that laughter, something typically associated with joy, could become a symbol of madness. That's when I started to realize that the fear of clowns goes beyond what we see on screen. It's rooted in something primal, something we can't fully explain. And as I walked that fine line between laughter and terror, I wondered, is fear just psychological? Or is there something darker, something real, that has turned clowns into our worst nightmares? Every time I think of John Wayne Gacy, I feel a chill run up my spine. He wasn't just an ordinary man. He seemed almost made to deceive, to confuse. On the outside, he was charismatic, friendly, almost like the neighborhood uncle you could trust to organize your kid's birthday party. But behind that friendly smile hid one of the most monstrous serial killers in history. And the most disturbing part? He loved to dress up as a clown. John Wayne Gacy was known for his persona as Pogo the Clown. He would dress up to entertain children at parties, spreading laughter and fun wherever he went. But no one imagined what he did when the party lights went out. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy terrorized the city of Chicago, committing crimes that would shock the world. He wasn't just a killer, he was a predator. A master manipulator who used his clown costume to mask his sinister intentions. Gacy's victims were young men, usually boys he lured in with promises of work or simple acts of kindness. He knew how to gain people's trust, how to make them let their guard down. Then he would take them to his house, a place that seemed harmless, until Gacy's true nature was revealed. There, he committed atrocities I'd rather not describe in detail. But the most chilling part is that many times, he wore his clown costume while doing it. The discovery of his crimes shook society to its core. It all started when a young man disappeared after being seen with Gacy. The ensuing investigation revealed a true nightmare. 29 bodies were found buried under Gacy's house. The smell, the details, the evidence, all of it turned that place into a symbol of pure evil. As the police unearthed the victims, Gacy's story made headlines. "The killer clown," the newspaper said. And with that, the fear of clowns, once something almost folkloric, became all too real. It was as though Gacy had torn open the curtain separating fantasy from reality, showing us that terror could be closer than we imagined. I've always wondered what made someone like Gacy put on a clown costume. Was it an attempt to hide? Or perhaps something more sinister? A way to mock his victims, to turn his own monstrosity into a twisted joke? Whatever it was, one thing was clear. He didn't just kill people. He destroyed the image of the clown as a symbol of joy. After he was caught, Gacy showed a cold, calculating demeanor, never expressing regret for his actions. During his trial, he even tried to justify his crimes, claiming insanity, but no one was convinced. He was sentenced to death, and his last words before execution were as disturbing as his life. "Kiss my ass." Gacy's case left an indelible mark on history. He didn't just take innocent lives, he turned the clown into an icon of terror. After him, no one could look at a red nose or an exaggerated laugh the same way. Gacy had proven that sometimes, true terror doesn't lie in fantasy but in reality. I still remember 2016, the year the clowns came back to scare us, but in a way no one expected. It wasn't in movies or horror books, but in real life. Suddenly, reports started emerging of people dressed as terrifying clowns showing up in forests, deserted streets, and even near schools. They didn't speak, didn't explain what they were doing. They just stood there motionless, staring at you, staring at. It was as if the terror from films like It had leaped off the screen and into our world. The first time I saw one of these videos, I thought it was a joke, something meant to get attention on the internet. But soon I realized it was something bigger. People from all over the world started reporting disturbing encounters with these clowns. In some cases, they just watched from a distance, but in others, they stalked or even threatened their victims. One particular video stood out. A group of friends driving at night comes across a clown standing in the middle of the road. He's holding a red balloon in one hand and a metallic object, maybe a knife, in the other. When the friends try to drive around him, the clown starts chasing the car. It was impossible not to feel a chill. At the time, the internet amplified the phenomenon in ways no one could have predicted. Social media was flooded with photos, videos, and reports, some real, others not so much. But the psychological impact was undeniable. You started asking yourself, what if I came across one of these clowns? What would I do? It was as if a collective hysteria had set in, a shared fear that felt bigger than any real threat. What's most strange is that it was never clear why these people were doing this. Some said it was just a bad prank. Others believed they were part of a cult or an organized movement. The truth is, no one knew for sure, and that uncertainty only fueled the fear. After all, what could be more terrifying than something you can't explain? The cases started to escalate and the police got involved. In some cities, sightings of clowns caused panic, closing schools and even mobilizing security teams. But, curiously, very few of these clowns were captured or identified. It was as if they appeared out of nowhere, caused chaos, and then vanished, leaving only fear behind. Thinking about it, maybe that was the point from the start, to turn the idea of a scary clown into something that could really happen. They toe-talked something that already lived in our nightmares and brought it into our world. And now, every time I see someone dressed as a clown, even at a children's party, I can't shake that chill. After all, we never know who's behind that mask. The lights flickered intermittently as I stared at the last hallway of the abandoned park. Everything had led me to this moment, to this place. It was almost ironic. Me, obsessed with understanding. The fear of clowns was about to confront the reality behind the terror. The stories I'd heard, the reports I'd investigated, all seemed to merge into a mosaic of tension and paranoia. At the end of the hallway, there was a half-open wooden door. From inside, I heard a sound that seemed like muffled laughter, but there was something wrong with it. It wasn't a happy laugh, it was discordant, as if it hid something macabre. My hands were sweating as I pushed the door open, and then I saw him. He was there, sitting on a wooden bench in the center of what looked like an old storage room. His face was painted white, eyes surrounded by dark shadows, and a manic smile drawn in red paint filled his face. He didn't say a word. He just watched me, laughing softly, as if he knew a secret I would never understand. In that moment, I realized the real terror isn't what we see or understand, but what remains unexplained. I was never one to believe in legends or ghost stories. I've always been the type of person who preferred logic, a rational explanation for everything. That's why, when I moved to that small town, I thought my life would be peaceful, without any surprises. But something that night made me question everything I thought I knew. I was walking alone around the neighborhood at night, exploring the new area. The street was empty, only lit by street lamps which were starting to flicker intermittently like they were about to go out. The cold wind cut through the air, and I pulled my coat tighter around me, feeling an increasing discomfort but without any apparent reason. The feeling of being watched wasn't new to me, but that night it was stronger, more tangible. Suddenly, the lights of a lamppost in front of me went out completely, leaving the street immersed in thick darkness. I tried to calm myself, telling myself that the light going out was just a technical malfunction, something common. But that's when I saw him. In the distance, almost blending with the shadows, a clown. He was standing still, not moving, with a grotesque smile on his face. What bothered me the most was that he didn't look human, or at least not like any clown I had seen in movies. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, he was gone. I stood there, motionless, trying to figure out if I was seeing things or if that being had really been there. There was no one else on the street, just me and the absolute silence. In the days that followed, I tried to forget what I saw that night. I kept telling myself it was just a hallucination, maybe the result of the stress from the move or loneliness. But every night the fear grew, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Sometimes when I closed my eyes to sleep, I thought I could hear footsteps on the sidewalk in front of my house, but when I looked out the window, there was nothing. Until one early morning, fear took shape. I woke up to a sound, a slight crack coming from outside, as if something, or someone, was messing with things in my yard. My first reaction was to ignore it and try to fall back asleep, but something wouldn't let me. The noise persisted and my body wouldn't allow me to close my eyes. I got up, my heart pounding, and went to the window. There he was again. The clown was standing across the street, almost blending into the darkness. His silhouette was grotesque, but what froze me was the fixed gaze he kept on my house, as if he knew exactly where I was. I curled up, hiding behind the curtain, but I couldn't look away. His white face, deep and dark eyes, excessive, stained smile. Every detail was etched in my mind. I grabbed my phone and trembling tried to take a photo, but when the camera focused, the streetlight closest to me started flickering, and the figure disappeared. Darkness once again took over the street, and I stood there, paralyzed with the sense that he was even closer. It couldn't be a coincidence, it couldn't be my imagination. Something was happening, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Went back to bed, but the laugh, that low, muffled laugh, seemed to echo through the house. I forced myself to sleep, but I couldn't. The clown, or whatever it was, wasn't going away, and I was starting to understand that maybe it never would. I knew I had to figure out what was happening. I couldn't ignore the fact that every night, the figure of the clown became more present, more real. Fear was consuming my life, and the simple idea that it could just be a mistake of perception seemed impossible to accept. When I moved to town, I didn't know I was about to get involved in something much bigger than mere superstition, so I decided to investigate. I went to the local library, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain the apparitions. I needed to understand what was going on and maybe find a way to get rid of it. By late afternoon, the library was silent. Only the sound of pages turning filled the space. I asked the librarian if there was anything on the town's history or urban legends. She hesitated as if she didn't want to talk about it, but eventually directed me to an old collection of newspapers and historical records. Flipping through the old newspapers, I found something that made me shiver. The story was about a traveling circus that passed through the town over 30 years ago. It was called the Circus of Shadows, and wherever it went, it attracted large crowds. But what caught my attention the most was the presence of a clown, who, according to reports, would stay in the park's shadows at night. His name was Victor, and his appearance was so strange that people avoided his shows. However, what really made the circus memorable in the town wasn't the clown, but the unexplained disappearances of several children. The authorities never found an explanation for what had happened, but soon the circus was shut down, and on a rainy night, Victor himself disappeared without a trace. Since then, locals started telling stories about the Clown of Darkness, being who only appeared where the lights failed, a being that was more than just a clown. He was a manifestation of fear itself. I started putting the pieces together. The clown Victor, who had mysteriously vanished, was connected to the presence of that creature. He wasn't just there to scare, but to feed off fear, to grow in the darkness and to strengthen himself in solitude. That night I could barely sleep, thinking that what was happening to me wasn't a coincidence. I was being hunted by a legend, by a force far beyond human understanding. And worse, the more I tried to escape, the more it followed me, the closer the clown got. It was then that I realized the clown wasn't a creature of the past. He was alive, or rather he existed in some way, and only appeared in the dark. Maybe he was just waiting for a new victim, someone like me, to start investigating what had been forgotten. I didn't know if I was dealing with a ghost, an entity, or a curse anymore. I only knew that he wouldn't stop until I became another part of his collection of fears. I was starting to lose track of what was real and what was just a nightmare. Sometimes it felt like everything that had happened since I moved to the town was just one big illusion, but at the same time there was that constant presence, that feeling of being watched, that never faded. The clown was always lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to appear again, and I knew that the only way to put an end to it was to face him. I decided to return to the place where I saw him for the first time, that empty street where the lights had started flickering. It was the only way to understand what was happening, or at least try. I knew it was a risky decision, but fear had already taken over me. I couldn't live like this anymore, with the constant feeling that he was watching me. That night I prepared myself. I grabbed a flashlight, a sort of improvised weapon, hoping it would somehow help me face what was haunting me. I walked down the deserted street, the biting wind on my face, and as I approached the spot where I had first seen him, my heart began to race. Fear was already taking over me, but I couldn't turn back. Then, the lights started flickering, like before. 1, 2, 3 times. And then, he appeared. The clown. This time, he wasn't standing still. He was moving, slowly and ominously, approaching me with heavy steps, almost as if the darkness around him amplified his presence. His smile, even more grotesque than I remembered, seemed to widen as he drew closer. The flashlight trembled in my hands and I felt a knot in my stomach, but I forced myself to keep walking toward the clown, trying not to show any fear. When he was just a few feet away, I finally saw it. The clown wasn't a normal man. He wasn't human. His hands were deformed, his fingers long and twisted. His eyes, dark as pitch, reflected nothing, as if there was no soul there. When he spoke, the voice didn't come from his mouth but seemed to echo in my mind. "You already know who I am," he said, the smile now stretching in an impossible way. "I am the darkness you fear, and you will never escape me." I felt a wave of panic flood me, but before I could move, the flashlight went out on its own. Darkness overtook everything, and his presence grew even stronger. The laughter echoed in my mind, and I didn't know if I was alive or if this was just a hallucination. Then I realized something terrifying. He wasn't a person. He was a manifestation of fear, fueled by darkness. The more I feared, the stronger he became. He wasn't there by chance. He had always been there in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to appear. I tried to run, but the shadows seemed to swallow me. The ground seemed to crumble beneath my feet. I ran aimlessly, not knowing where I was going. The laughter seemed to follow me, closer with every step. There was no escape. I woke up in my bed, sweating and not knowing exactly how I got there. The last thing I remembered was the darkness taking over, the clown coming closer, his eternal smile, and the laughter that seemed to echo inside my mind. But now, as I opened my eyes, everything seemed normal. The room was quiet, the weak morning light filtering through the window. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But something was wrong. The smell of wet earth still lingered in the air, and when I looked at the floor, I saw dirty footprints, as if someone had walked through here without caring to clean up. My breath quickened when I saw what was on my bed. A small clown nose, dirty and stained with something I didn't want to identify. I got up and went to the window. I looked out at the street but saw nothing. What made me freeze was the sound, the low, muffled laugh that now seemed to echo in the distance. I forced myself to ignore it, but when I started the car to leave, the lights began to flicker. The laugh grew louder, and I knew deep down that he was still there. And now the question was, how do you escape something that's inside of you?